Okay, we are now live on YouTube, folks, and I'm hitting record as well.
So we'll have 4 minutes of silence. Ready. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on this beautiful sunny day. Glad to have you all join us. It is time 3 o'clock in the afternoon to call this meeting to order. Note that we do have quorum with all councillors in attendance. So with that, I'll ask you to join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the business of the corporation. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table? And I'd like the general nature thereof. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to declare on number 8D as what happens on this property will affect my property values. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I understand from the clerk that you just simply will turn off your video and we'll just assume that you're not there. Okay, thank you. I don't have any announcements this afternoon, but I'll ask around the horseshoe if there's anyone who does. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have something that I just want to put a big thank you out there to Bruce Power. I'm going to read something that they have done during this COVID-19 time that we're going through, that Bruce Power has made a custom run of hand sanitizer. And I'm going to read you what's on the front label. I copied it down. It says it's a limited edition. It's got limited quantity, clean hands, safe hands. It's a community partnership to distribute hand sanitizer to those who need it, by Bruce Power and Three Sheets Brewing at Weismer House, Junction 56 Distillery. And it's my understanding that our local grocery store here in town received quite a quantity of hand sanitizer. I was informed that hospitals are getting this hand sanitizer and old age homes. And I just think that that's an outstanding move on a corporate citizen's aspect during this time. It's something that they didn't have to do, but they certainly have, and they've done it in a big way. So thank you very much to Bruce Power.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bell. I just want to mention too that this was brought forward to as a gift to all of our municipality through the Emergency Control Group, and we greatly appreciate their support going forward. So well said, thank you. Any other announcements from Council? Councillor Greenfield and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sure all council is aware of this, but I'm not sure if the community is up to date. The Georgian Bay Coyotes, our prize runners, are still on their way to the West Coast. Having left St. John's, Newfoundland some time ago, they have made it all the way back to me virtually, and from here, they're going to continue up the Bruce Peninsula, across to the Manitoulin, and up into the far north of northern Ontario, heading all the way to the West Coast. A virtual run, and they're running every day now, and we wish them all the best of luck. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield, and congratulations to them. It's a worthwhile exercise for sure. And Deputy Mayor, you had an announcement.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I just wanted to remind everyone about the Open for Business site that has been created by the Chamber of Commerce. And this site has up-to-date information on the businesses that are open, and talks about how businesses are conducting themselves throughout this time frame. So you can find that on Facebook or on the Chamber of Commerce website. And I hope that this site will encourage people to shop locally, support our businesses as much as they can through the information that they can find on this site. So Open for Business on the Chamber Facebook and website. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from Council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into public participation and welcome Mike and Marie Donovan. But before we do, I just want to mention as well that Council is always happy to hear comments and concerns of our residents. It's impossible to come into the Council at this stage, but we do welcome your opinions and your requests for presentations or deputations on items that are on the agenda of the day. We would ask that you contact the clerk to register but before noon on the day of the agenda for a deputation. And with that, again, I will welcome Mike and Marie Donovan. Good to have you with us.
Just trying to get them unmuted and then they'll be ready to go.
How's that?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and councillors. We are Mike and Marie Donovan, 20-year residents of rural Meaford. The natural beauty of this area is what drew us to make Meaford our forever home. Today, we would like to address the use of a slashing machine for municipal roadside vegetation management.
2 years ago, we raised strong objection to the deployment of this slashing machine on the roadside separating our property from the Bayview Nature Preserve.
We were aghast when this machine began to lay waste to the face of the escarpment. It was ruthlessly destroying the century-old cedars clinging to the edge of the rock. Trees had been hacked in a rugged fashion as high as 40 feet in the air. The debris was strewn over a wide area and remains where it fell to this day, with no attempt made to clean it up.
We called and emailed councillors, and Councillor Bell raised the issue at the council meeting September 24th, 2018, and was told it was part of routine maintenance. A meeting was held on site, and we were given verbal assurance that they would proceed in a more cautious fashion and clean up using other equipment, including manual labor where necessary. We waited hopefully. However, after 2 years, we recognized the betrayal of trust, and it hurts deeply.
We turned to the immediate problem posed by the huge volumes of debris dropped in the ditches, plugging the natural occurring springs emanating from the escarpment. The slash altered the watercourse in the drainage area, and our well would no longer fill. Any water that did seep through was as brown as tea, having been steeped in the foliage filling the drainage basin.
Rural residents have a right to source water protection just as those in the urban area already have. Our wells depend on streams or long roadsides. Therefore, maintenance crews must be aware of these streams and avoid activity that jeopardizes the quality of our drinking water.
The slasher damages trees and leaves them standing. These are languishing and destined to a premature death. The ragged limbs, half-sawn trunks, and jagged stumps are unsightly. They pose a danger to hikers and animals alike. There's no communication with landowners or community groups alerting them to the ongoing activity or seeking feedback on the result.
As rural landowners, we often feel we're not given the same consideration afforded to the urban areas. Could you imagine if this machine were to be let loose in a settlement area like Leith or Annan, let alone in the heart of urban Meaford? The outcry would be deafening.
In recent weeks, activity using this slasher on our road closer to Highway 26 prompted us to email pictures of the horrifying devastation occurring once again. Councillor Bell raised the issue on May the 11th meeting of council, and it resulted in a notice of motion being brought forward to today's meeting.
On the days immediately after the notice of motion was filed, an armada of trucks, a hi-ho, a bucket truck, a chipper, and numerous staff members with chainsaws and pole saws attempted to remedy the carnage. The cost of this cleanup is inestimable. The continued deployment of such resources is obviously not sustainable.
There has to be a better way that is both effective and cost efficient. A targeted removal of problem trees and therefore manageable cleanup is clearly in the interest of the environment, residents, visitors, as well as the municipal budget.
Ontario Hydro regularly maintain their roadside right-of-way and clear foliage that poses a risk to power lines. They employ a method that is acceptable to residents.
Alternatively, there are numerous local farmers and logging contractors with the equipment, training, and initiative to respond to a call to tender. This process would ensure high-quality work at a competitive price.
Road allowances are in need of attention, and they didn't get away in 1 or 2 years. And so it's reasonable to bring them back into shape over a protracted period that the budget can support. We're grateful to Council for their time and attention this afternoon, and Councillor Bell's motion is a common sense plea to understand the issue, discover the costs, explore the alternatives, and make a decision to resolve this issue once and for all. We urge each of you to support this motion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike and Marie, and thank you for your passion and your ongoing interest in preserving our environment. We really appreciate the time that you've taken today to speak to us. I will ask Tori to respond to your comments as well as to Councillor Bell's motion when it comes forward before council. Certainly you can watch the proceedings on YouTube as we go along. But again, I just want to thank you for your time and your comments today.
Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor and councillors.
So we'll move on now to the consent agenda. And today we have 3 items that we have seen before on the consent agenda. COR 2020-24, a project update on the Meaford Public Library. The waste management summary in INF 2020-03 and a COM 2020-09, Museum for a Strategic Plan update. First of all, are there any of those that council would like to pull? Councillor Kentner?
Yes, and through your worship and with your indulgence, I think we skipped council inquiries on the agenda. I don't know if we can come back to that perhaps.
You're right. My apologies. I did. So let's hold that thought and go back on the agenda to council inquiries. Thank you for that, Councillor Kentner. We're all awake now. Barb's awake.
2 questions.
So we'll move on then to council inquiries, and Councillor Kentner, you first.
I have 2 questions, perhaps for Mr. Armstrong, if he's available. First of all, I wondered if there is any update on the status of the Campus of Care project for Cook Street, and specifically, is there a way of staging a public meeting during the declared emergency?
Yes, thank you. Through the worship, we are currently working with the proponent right now to set up a public meeting in that regard. He originally wanted to have his own initial open houses so the public could come in and happen, but that's obviously a constraint. I believe that we're looking, subject to their confirmation, we're looking the beginning of July to have their public meeting, and that's what they've requested. So we're working with them on that.
Excellent. And just if I may, can you confirm that the Lions Club request to preserve the engraved paving stones at Fred Raper Park is being acted on?
I will say that I forwarded that message on to Mr. Chapman, who's responsible for the park, and I'd have to get him to reply on just the status of that.
Thank you.
And Councillor Bartley?
Mayor, and this would probably be to Rob. He can direct this. Is there any chance, Rob, as staff or council of the municipality of Meaford, we can ask the OPP that we are paying $2 million a year to act vigorously upon our harbor issue with the different people down there causing trouble? I do not believe for a minute that the OPP is supposed to be the best in the land could not surveillance, even from a distance, lay some charges and put an end to this corruption. Is that possible?
Rob?
Sorry, I was maybe looking, Matt sort of oversees the OPP. I don't know if he wants to speak to it, but I think that's probably a good first step, is having a chat with them on just what they can do, because everything we see really looks to be an enforcement of OPP with the issues that we're dealing with. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Matt.
Good afternoon, Council. Yes, I think we all are aware that we can't tell the OPP what to do. They set their own policing priorities and decide what are the things that they need to take action on or not. But we can certainly be in touch with them to try and sort of say that the municipality is keen that they look into it, but I can't promise any action.
If I may, just to add to that, we have heard from the individual himself that he has called the non-emergency number and the police have responded. And we can also say that lately there have been an extraordinary presence of the OPP in the area. And so that is underway as we stand. So this is needing some further discussion. Councillor Bartley?
Yes, I know I'm probably stepping out of bounds here. Maybe it should be Councillor Bell on the police board or the police side of things, but if you want me to come to that meeting with the OPP, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, thank you. And while we're on that topic, I'd just like to add that this is a situation that's been going on for 4 years. We've been hearing about it from residents along Bayfield Street all this time. And I just think it's reached a point now where we need to deal with this. I know the OPP have been contacted several times. I've contacted them myself, and they go down and speak to the individuals, and then the same sorts of disrespectful behavior occur again. And we're talking about public urination and drinking alcohol other than residents, and destruction of public property. Fish are cleaned on the sidewalk, and the remains are tossed onto the rocks, attracting all kinds of critters. There have been threats involved to public citizens. So I think this has reached a point where it has to be dealt with. And I hope that through Matt's conversation with the OPP that we can put an end to this once and for all.
Anything further? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you.
You turn it on.
The Bayfield Street situation. This is not getting any better. Police have not been effective. It's got to the point now where there have been threats uttered, and threatening is an indictable offense. It needs to be looked into, and it has to be looked into very quickly. I'm quite willing to bring forward a notice of motion, and I'm planning on bringing forward a notice of motion later in the meeting to have security cameras installed, at least here and there along Bayfield Street. That way, right now it's a my word against his word sort of situation. I think the only way we're going to be able to gather some definite proof of what's going on is to have it on video footage, and surely then the OPP would at least have some fuel to go ahead and make some concrete action down there. Put an end to this nonsense. It's been going on much too long, and it has to stop. Thank you for that. And I do have another question on another item, but I'll digress for a couple of minutes and let other council members get in here. Thank you.
Is there anybody else before I turn it back to the Deputy Mayor? Seeing none. Okay, Shirley, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I would just like to suggest at this point in time that I will second Councillor Greenfield's motion when that comes forward later in the meeting, and suggest that we move forward with looking at the installation of cameras, and recognizing that this is a public space, and that we would be fully authorized to insert those cameras to protect our own municipal public space. And I did have another question if there's nothing more on that particular topic right now.
There's nothing further.
Okay. I wanted to ask Mr. Chapman, if I may, in relation to the harbor. I understand access for boaters is restricted to a time frame between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. And I'm just wondering about the reasoning behind that particular restriction, and if this is common amongst harbors in our neighboring marinas, or just why we're limiting anyone to 8 to 3. Anybody who is working would not be able then to utilize their boat. So I'll leave that to Mr. Chapman to answer.
Certainly through the worship, this has been done not so people really can use their boat, but so that there is a month period of time for Richardson's to get all of the boats launched and into the water, so that when we actually open the harbor, everybody's boat is in the water and they can start to use it. We are actually going to be fencing off the pier so that it's only going to be open from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m., 7 days a week. We only have staff available to be able to open and close during those hours because we are short 17 seasonal staff right now. The expectation is that this will get people's boats in the water. It will help out a local business in order to allow them to do the launch. But this really isn't about people having the ability to use their boats for the month of June. We aren't charging anybody any dockage for June. This is just trying to work with the local boaters, the yacht club, and the local business. The reason that we're not opening until July 3rd is because we have construction underway at the Harbor House. It isn't expected to be completed until the end of June. And because of that construction, we have no washrooms, no shower houses, and we have no water or power going out to the docks. So they're really, not serviceable at this stage of the game. So we had people asking if they could get their boats in the water to make sure that they could be ready for July 3rd, and that's what we're attempting to try and do. If people want to use their boats on a daily basis because they're fisher people or something along those lines, my suggestion would be that they, we don't have to have their boat on their slip come June 1st. They can wait until July, and that they would simply launch their boat on a daily basis from the boat launch if they wanted to use it for fishing purposes.
Thank you for that. Okay, seeing nothing further from
Councillor Greenfield, I think, had another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see his hand up there now. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. This is on a completely other note. The emergency order that has been declared, of course, by the province and our municipality, like many other municipalities, we're not sure when that may be lifted. This is a two-part question. I guess the first part is there any talk amongst the control group of perhaps our municipality lifting our emergency order before the province does theirs, or are we waiting for them to take the initiative? And the second question is there any way we can gainfully sell our municipality because of the fact that we have had only one case of the virus thus far, and I understand that has been cleared by now. To me, this is an excellent chance to advertise our area as a healthy, clean, strong part of Southern Ontario, and I think we should maybe include that in some of our future promotions. I just wonder, maybe Mr. Armstrong could comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. With regard to the declaration of the emergency, the Provincial Emergency Operations Center has weekly meetings that our CEMC, Brittany, attends. And that question has been asked by quite a few municipalities about how long do we continue? Because we're into an emergency that's not unique to anyone. So they're looking for provincial guidance on how long a municipality should be in a declared state of emergency. And we're waiting for feedback through them on that regard. I don't believe anybody has at this point, but that's sort of we're looking to the professionals on that. With regard to the marketing, I have a feeling as a lot of our developers that are anxiously kicking off their marketing strategies will be looking at that and possibly using that to market their own developments. They do the majority of big marketing to drive people to buy their homes or buy their units or whatever the form of development is. So I imagine they will be looking at that, and then we'll be looking at that probably more on the long term once we're out of this. And I don't think we want to jump the gun and be marketing something, because we know with the spikes and numbers that are happening in Toronto, marketing something that could turn on us. And so we just want to be cautiously and proceeding with that regard. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, I guess I have another question about the boat launch. I understand the rationale about not having the slips ready, and about the harbor house not being ready and not having services to the docks. But for the everyday fisher person, I guess is what we're calling them, fishermen. But why is it that hard to have a spot for somebody to put their boat in to after 3 o'clock, and to have them have the ability to be out there for a couple hours to fish? I'm not quite understanding the reasoning behind that. I don't know whether that's what your question was more getting to or not, but it just seems like we are kind of hampering a certain amount of the people that don't have waterfront and have no way of getting their boats into the water just for a day use. So I just wondered if Darcy, you could talk to that a little bit more.
Through your worship, just to be clear, that the launch is open and people can use the launch for day use. So that they could, if they have a boat on a trailer, they can launch it and unlaunch it as many times as they want right now. This would be for our seasonal slips.
So if I may, so if somebody wanted to go down this afternoon after 3 o'clock, launch their boat, go out fishing for a couple hours, and then come back at 6 or 7 o'clock, they could get the boat back out. Is that what you're saying, Darcy?
That is correct. This is only for the 170, give or take, seasonal slips that we have that lure inside the harbor. So the expectation is that, I have staff that start in the Parks Facility Services at 7 o'clock in the morning. They'll be able to make their way down there before or by 8 o'clock to open it up. They're done by 3:30. They'll do a dock walk at the end of the day at 3 o'clock, make sure that people still aren't on their boat. And then they will lock up the gate so that people can't get through. It's the way that we make sure that, we try and have some security for those boats that are down there as well, because typically we have staff on site for extended periods 7 days a week, but we don't have staff right now. I've got one person who's being pulled in many different directions. So that's the reason that we are doing this. And we're really just trying to accommodate requests that have come through Richardson's, the Yacht Club, and various boaters to try and get their boat in the water.
Deputy Mayor.
Whoops, there I go, sorry. Thank you, Your Worship. And recognizing that these boats would have their own facilities, it just seems to me that we're holding back a month of what is already a very short season for boating. Could we not consider bringing down portable units for this group of folks so that they could get on and enjoy their boats while the harbor house construction is being completed?
Through your worship, I have no power to those boats. So they can't, they might be self-powered for a while, but the majority of these boats need shore power to, be moored at the harbor for any length of time. I would not want to bring porta potties down there. I wouldn't want to put porta potties in any of our parks or facilities, because I don't know how we're going to maintain them, clean them, disinfect them, so on and so forth, which is yet another reason my staff are working right now along with various associations through Parks and Rec Ontario, Ontario Recreation Facilities Association, so on and so forth, to try and understand how we set up proper standard operating guidelines and protocols as far as how we clean, how we disinfect, and how we make sure that everybody maintains their distance, to make sure that we know what we're doing and we can communicate that to the boating community come July 3rd when we expect to actually be open.
Councillor Kentner.
where's the contractor getting his power for? He's got to be able to run his saws and his screwdrivers and so forth.
Through your worship, I believe that he's probably using a generator or using power tools that use a battery. We have power cut off to the docks, to the main docks that feed through the harbor house. There might still be power coming into the harbor house, but there's not power going to the docks. We have to realize that the biggest issue that we've got is that we do not have facilities available for people to use. There are no washrooms and there are no showers available because they are all being renovated right now. So without having proper facilities for people, it's impossible to let people use it when and how they want.
Just
Go ahead.
through your worship, I just the comment that I had a chat with the Commodore of the Yacht Club, and he said he had no idea that the clubhouse was being renovated. I was sort of,
through your worship, I can appreciate that because the expectation was that we were actually going to be done construction by the 1st to 2nd week of May. And boats don't even usually go in starting until that point in time. But because COVID happened and all construction in the province of Ontario was shut down for 5 weeks, and now contractors are having problems trying to source out some materials. We've been advised that the timeline is now the end of June. There's nothing I can do about it. Everybody has to deal with the same pain as we're all going through, globally with regards to COVID. I'm sorry, to the boating community, but we did recognize a bunch of people reached out to us saying, if you don't let us start until July 3rd, some of us aren't going to have our boats launched until the middle of August. So what the heck's the point in even doing that? So that's why we made this change. We're putting up fencing to try and accommodate security concerns, and we'll let people get their boats in the water so that come July, they're actually ready to use. And that's when we're going to start charging them for dockage anyways, is not until July.
I appreciate that. I think that is great. Thank you. But I mean, I don't believe that he knew that the project was happening at all, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
I believe he did. I had to chat with I did actually have a conversation in an email off to the Commodore and talked about what the holdup was with the Harbor House renovations. So that has been done some time ago now. And Deputy Mayor, you had a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a further question for Mr. Chapman. Recognizing that Owen Sound and the Town of Blue Mountains are bringing in portable units for their harbor areas, do we know if they have determined some protocols for their usage? Is there anything we can learn from that we could then maybe consider units for our own harbor?
Through your worship, again, I will try and stress that there are multiple factors. Just even if we brought portable toilets down, there is still no water and no power to the docks. And there won't be until the end of June. We are not in the same situation as the City of Owen Sound or the Town of Blue Mountains because we are undergoing a renovation at the facility right now.
Anything further, Council? Okay. Seeing none, can we move on then to motions and bylaws? And we already began with the consent agenda. Is there anything from those three motions coming forward that the council would like to pull? Councillor Kentner.
That's item 7.2A.
Oh, wait, we're not there. We're not there yet. This is the consent agenda. Is this, are you looking at COR 2020-24, the public library?
Oh, I'm looking at, I beg your pardon, you're correct.
I'm just looking for the consent agenda at this stage. Is there anything on those three that anyone would like to pull? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to put them on the table, please, for Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Vickers. Okay, all in favor of receiving those three, and that is carried. Okay, now we'll move into 7.2, and the first one on the docket is COR 2020-25, the tax rates and ratios bylaw. And I have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Vickers. Okay, and Darcy, you're there for discussion on that?
Yes, Your Worship. A bit of housekeeping. This finalizes the whole budget process. A little bit later than normal this year, given that we had to wait. We always have to wait for the county to finalize the tax ratios first, as they're the ones who set them for the whole county. They just did that about a week and a half ago, with the one significant change in the ratios being the farm tax class. We're going from 0.24 to 0.218. So that, of course, reflects the overall calculation of the tax rates for the municipality as well. I think the big thing to note, is going to table 2 in the page 3 of the report, which just highlights the average assessed property and what their tax bill impact is going to be. So for the average residential assessment of just over $268,000 this year, the change in taxes is about $72 for the whole year. And that includes county, education, and municipal combined.
Thank you, Darcy. Comments from council? Councillor Kentner, yes.
Okay, I just would, through your worship, like to make a comment on the tax rates and ratios part. Very pleased with the property tax assistance for low-income seniors and low-income persons with disabilities. And I want to thank staff for their initiative in making these measures possible in the current tax year. However, I am taking issue with the recommendation on the vacancy rebate program for commercial and industrial properties. Staff wants to wait for the county and other lower tier administrations before we change our policy, rather than consider a motion that I moved and that this council passed to look at dropping the rebate. And just because others are not showing leadership on this is not really a satisfactory rationale in my mind for shelving my motion and council's vote. I'm very open to hearing if I'm wrong on how I see this, and even changing my mind on it. But I don't want to follow the county and everybody else. I'd like to lead on this issue because, and I'm going to give you just 2 samples. If you look at the east side of Sykes Street, there are more vacant stores there than there are real stores. And if you drive down Cook Street, you'll see broken windows on the old Amarok office building. And to me, I just don't see why we should be providing tax relief for investors who are making Meaford look like a dying town.
So through your worship, to comment on that, I can say that the buildings in which Councillor Kentner are describing are not included in this tax program. Last year, there were 5 commercial properties that received a rebate, none of which were in the commercial core of the downtown of the municipality. The property has to be vacant for a minimum of 6 months, and it has to be marketed for rent. And the owner of the building has to prove that through the application process, and they have to apply annually for this program. It is only a 30% rebate on the taxes. The total that the municipality rebated last year was about $4,600. If we implemented the program, it would only be for the municipality's share, because the county deals with the other portion of the taxes, which is why I would prefer to wait until the county does it as well. So that if we're doing it, then it's across the board and it's just not the municipality's share. So if a property owner owns a property and ultimately wants that property not to be rented, or wants to leave it in somewhat of a derelict state, although it can only go to a certain point and then property standards kicks in, there is nothing that we as a municipality can do about it. And the property tax rebate has no effect on this whatsoever, because they actually have to be marketing the property for rent.
Okay, I'm very interested if anybody else has an opinion. We've got a big agenda here, happy to move on, but I wanted to, just see what other people think. We did vote to consider this some time ago.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll throw my 2 cents worth in. I have it written here. I was going to comment anyways. I agree with Councillor Kentner, but and I agree that we should wait till the county gets theirs so we can do it all in one law-abiding act. But I don't think we should wait for the other municipalities. As long as the county is ready to go, we should be ready to go and be a leader in it with the municipalities. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to Councillor Kentner. This is something along the lines of why I introduced a notice of motion about a sunset clause for developers a few months ago. Now, I understand that is in the works with our official plan review, and that's going to take some time. But no, these darkened storefronts or office fronts or any buildings in our urban area, it's painting a terrible picture for our municipality. Thank you.
And Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I remember you bringing this forward a few months ago or a year ago, Ross. So, and I agree with you. But now that I hear the explanation from Darcy that there is only six people that are, or six corporations or people that are applying for it, it isn't the ones that we'd like to target, I think, as councillors and as a municipality. So I understand the reasoning why we maybe aren't going ahead with it, and I agree with Steve there that once the county does come on board or they figure out where they're going with it, that we should follow. But for us to go out on our own for just 6 properties of $4,600, maybe it's. I know your gesture, Ross, is where we all want to go. I just don't think it's going to get us there. So.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillor Kentner, for bringing your thoughts forward. Mr. Chapman mentioned property standards, and I wonder if there's anything more that you can share with us, Darcy, in that regard, reflecting upon, as has been mentioned, the condition of our downtown and the state of those storefronts. And we've talked about this many times before, but there certainly is a need there for some improvement. Is there anything you can tell us about what might be underway in that regard?
Through Your Worship, I'm actually going to defer to Matt because property standards is under his portfolio.
Through the man, and thank you for the question. Council will remember we passed an updated property standards bylaw in the middle of 2019. So within the downtown core, where it fits within the heritage district, we have some additional powers to enforce property standards. But council needs to remember that really is about fascias and safety. So buildings outside of the heritage district, we can still only do what we were able to do for many, many years, which is ensure they are secure. So as long as they are boarded up, or as long as those broken windows the Councillor Kentner referred to is perhaps even only one pane of a dual pane system, then that's still secure, and so that would count. We have a report coming actually to talk about some proactive bylaw enforcement issues. That will probably be at the next meeting. But as of now, we only respond to complaints about property standards. And so if people have complaints about downtown businesses, then they should complain to the bylaw department and they will investigate. But if it's just that they look a bit dirty because the property is empty inside, that's not going to fit within the property standards bylaw.
I see nothing further on that. So I will call the question then. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to CAO 2020, the Enbridge gas line request for support. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? The Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley. And over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Worship. So this is a request that we received from Innsbridge Grass, who's looking to make an application for funding through the provincial government to service Sunnyside Beach area with natural gas. For those that may recall, Union Gas a few years back made a similar application for funding in that area, but never did receive the funding. So Enbridge is wanting to proceed with that, is looking for the municipality's support of their application, which we have no objection to. I know that there's interest in the residents up there to obtain gas. What we're unprepared to support at this time is the request for financial support through the incremental tax equivalent program. What that program is the increased value of land that's received through the introduction of gas. And as taxes go up, you can phase those in over a number of years. We currently have that program in effect in our downtown community improvement programs. Should someone do some significant work to a downtown building that increases the taxes, it can incrementally, but those really are one-off projects that we can administer. Our biggest concern here is our ability to administer that type of project over a long term, and Darcy sort of highlighted through the financial impact section of what would all be involved. In talking to Enbridge, they're not concerned with that. A lot of the municipalities are declining that and just giving support for the project at this time. So it is consistent with what they're receiving from most municipalities with regard to these applications. So we're in a position to recommend that council support this at this time.
Thank you for that, Rob. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and it's probably not been overlooked, but in the letter dated to the mayor on February 20th, it says you have 10 to 15 days to react. Is that gone out the window now, Rob?
In talking to them recently, the application deadline is next week, so they just need our deadline, and that's why this report's going directly to council and not a two-step process.
Okay. Anything further on that? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of this proposal, and that is carried. Okay, moving on to COM 2020-10, the Emergency Control Group membership and bylaw 2020-30, the emergency plan and program. Can I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley. Okay, and Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report is fairly self-explanatory. It comes as a direct result of Council's motion that they passed at the last meeting, requesting that the Deputy Mayor and a councillor be added to the Emergency Control Group. We've turned that around and the bylaw is here for you to consider today. You'll remember the conversation last time round that talked about each member of the control group having to have specific duties within the emergency control plan. So as part of the proposed updates to the plan today, that we've defined duties for the Deputy Mayor as being the key liaison with the business community, and for the appointed councillor to be the liaison with the community groups. These are roles that we think will be very beneficial for the control group to have and really take advantage of many of those personal connections that the members of council have. The other thing that's worth noting is about alternates. Every member of the control group has an alternate, and that's so that if somebody is away and unable to attend control group meetings or is sick in the example of the current emergency, somebody can step up and take their place. What we're recommending here is that the Deputy Mayor is the appointed councillor's alternate, and the appointed councillor is the Deputy Mayor's alternate. The reason for that is principally that all members of the control group and alternates must take part every year in training and the annual exercise. And if we have other members of council be the alternates, that will be a fourth and fifth member of council. And that would mean that every one of those training activities and the annual exercise would have a quorum of council and would have to become a formal council meeting open to the public. with minutes and attached and so on. And from our point of view, we didn't feel that that was a positive way of dealing with training and exercise activities. The roles that have been defined for the deputy mayor and the appointed councillor, we believe could, for a short period of time, they could cope with doing both of those liaison roles. And obviously we would very much hope that we wouldn't need to go into alternates, as we haven't for any part of the emergency so far. The first bylaw before you today is to actually adopt the emergency plan. That makes those formal appointments. The second bylaw, which I think is item D on your agenda, is our regular bylaw that appoints councillors to specific committees and so on. That includes a proposal to add the deputy mayor to the emergency control group and Councillor Bell, who was defined through a consultative process that the mayor led. That bylaw also has proposals for the 2 members of council to be on the Parks Advisory Committee.
Any questions for Matt? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, I just want to say how pleased I am to have the ability to participate on the Emergency Management Control Group. A question, Matt. It's suggested that there will be a full review of the emergency plan and program following the emergency, and a report, I understand, will come to council. But I'm wondering, during the review process, would council have an opportunity to provide input for the review?
We do review the emergency plan every year. That's part of the requirements from the province. And obviously this time, having battle tested the plan for the first time really in the municipality, that will be a more comprehensive look. I don't see any reason why we couldn't come to council with an initial report and get some feedback and then produce a final plan for adoption later on in the year.
Thank you. And if I may, just a further question in relation to the roles and responsibilities for Councillor Bell and myself. The ones that are prescribed are very appropriate for the 2 of us, but moving into another term of council, perhaps the roles might not be appropriate for the particular members. So I assume that would be adjusted then with each term of council?
Through the mayor, it wouldn't be automatically because I think it's important that we establish roles for the necessary roles rather than for the individual people. But I think the council could certainly consider who was appointed to these, or if there was a particular issue with any of them, then we could look at that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, fellow councillors. Madam Mayor, you and I have had some conversation on this, and I hope, Madam Mayor, that you can really feel that by doing this is to really lead in municipal governance and help this group. And this COVID-19, it's not going away, and it's been a dynamics that is so different than anyone could have ever conceived for implementing the emergency control group. And I'm pleased to be the one to be on this emergency group. And I just want to say thank you for when you were listening to me, Madam Mayor, when you and I were talking about this. And anyway, thank council for getting behind this when I brought this forward. I did believe that a change could be done, and I believe that a change should be done. And momentarily we will prove our thinking on that. So thank you all, and thank you, Madam Mayor, when you were listening to me.
Councillor Bell. Anything further? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of receiving this? And that is approved. And now moving into bylaw 2020-31 to appoint council members to committees, boards, and other bodies. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Greenfield and Deputy Mayor, thank you. And now I'm okay. Okay, Matt, did you want you've already spoken to that. Is there anything to add, council? Any comments, questions on that? And seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of receiving this report? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to CAO 2020-08, the COVID-19 Emergency Management Update number 3. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Thank you. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Greenfield. And over to you, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So this is, I guess it's COVID update number 3. Within the report, we're looking for some direction just from council to confirm a couple of things at the end. We know that council on May, or sorry, not council, the province on May 1st announced the phase 1 or stage 1 of returning of services, some of which affect us. We had some discussion in council inquiries, so don't need to go back to that, but we do have our tennis courts, dog parks, and the boat launch open as a result of the phase 1. It's very important to note that the province said that consideration of the next phase will be given after monitoring of the number of cases, and could be 2 to 4 weeks or more, depending on what that result is as things open up. In addition, it's also very important that we seek a lot of advice when we consider these opening ups and of facilities and going forward and what's required. We attach the health units guidelines for opening facilities and how they should be operated. And it's all those are things that we're going through, and our different staff group that we've created is looking at that as we want to start allowing the public to come back into the municipal office. What does that mean for us? What do we have to have in place to do that? You can see a lot of businesses have those are implementing that, and we're looking at that for us as we go forward. With regard to economic recovery planning, I've attached a copy of the economic recovery support team that's been created, an informal group of the BIA, Chamber of Commerce members and other members of the public that are working with Janet and myself in bringing things forward. Looking at both the short-term and the medium-term things that can be done. They're not looking long-term stuff. That will be coming out of the economic development strategy and as we go forward, but more on the short-term stuff right now. Some of the quick stuff that's being done is the Shop Local campaign, as Deputy Mayor mentioned earlier, that online business is component is part of that. As we promote, everything we do is the Shop Local, is that component. The other thing that we would like to bring forward, and that's one of the things we're looking for direction forward, is a bit of an assistance program available to business to set up an e-commerce. So those businesses that are having challenges selling their wares and aren't set up with an online presence, it's giving that. This is very similar to the Digital Main Street program that was run at the province that's just ending. The town of Blue Mountains, you may have saw advertisement that they were looking at it through the Center of Business Development. Our financial commitment is the same commitment, but we're working with the chamber and letting them run with the program. Where there'll be a $500 matching fee, or sorry, matching grant to a $500 investment for a business that wants to get set up in e-commerce. The memorandum of understanding was created so that there was just an understanding that the money is given and what the municipal conditions, the reporting back to us on the successful businesses. We'll see how it goes. This would facilitate 10 businesses that aren't set up in e-commerce and wish to do that. It's not available to franchises, but just for local, because a lot of times the franchises already have e-commerce and tied to it. So that's sort of one of the recommendations coming out of that. The other thing we're looking at is bag tags. The municipality of Meaford, or sorry, the control group at the time, because council wasn't meeting or able to meet initially when this set in, we waived the bag tag fee initially due to concerns about the ability to obtain bag tags. Also, one of our main neighbor, Owen Sound, waived a fee, and there was confusion on whether it applied to us. So we thought it would just be easier for us to waive it for the interim. We now know that Owen Sound is reinstated as of June, sorry, it might have been last week. They've reinstated the requirement for full bag tags. We also know that some of our other neighboring municipalities like Chatsworth never did provide one free bag tag. They just looked at ways to getting bag tags to people should they require it. So in this report, we're recommending that effective June 1st, we go back to requiring bag tags. That results, it's a cost to the municipality about $2,500 a week due to the free bag tags that people have been taking advantage of, estimated. Just an update on the tax deferral side. We know that council gave the deferral of the tax deferral with waiving of certain fees. Of the 6,700 tax bills, we had 190 property owners take advantage of that service. But also to note that the 750 taxpayers that were in arrears prior to also receive advantage of it by default. So in a sense, we ended up with about 950 people who were able to take advantage of that incentive that was provided by council. That's pretty much all I have on this report with the 2 recommendations.
Thank you, Rob. Any comments or questions for Rob? Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. I'm just wondering, Rob, the $5,000, from which budget is that being taken?
Yeah, through the worship. Our strategic initiatives budget, economic development strategic initiatives budget, obviously some of the programs that we had planned to do this year, but because of COVID aren't being done. So it's repurposing those funds. So they're already in the budget for that and meet along with those objectives.
Thank you.
And Councillor Vickers?
Thank you, Your Worship. My internet connection's not real stable here, so I don't know how much you're hearing of this, but I think even with the garbage bag tag relief, I know I had a person tell me that, they put out 2 bags of garbage and neither one of them had a tag on it, and the garbage truck still picked up both of them. So I think it is time to march on, and the program probably was getting abused a little bit, and as much as nobody likes to pay tax or to buy the bag tags, we do have to look out for the municipality and realize the lost revenue that is taking place. So hopefully you heard what I had to say there. Thanks.
We did. Thank you. And Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. These unprecedented times when we're talking about the taxes and folks that needed to take a little bit more time to pay their taxes. I don't know about the rest of my fellow councillors, but in the years that I have been serving as a councillor, I never got questions about how long do I have before I have to pay my taxes, or what happens if I can't pay my taxes. So we know that our community at large, there's a lot of people who are hurt by this, and it does not surprise me that the numbers have gone up from, let's say, years previous, and that we've gained another, a couple of hundred taxpayers that needed some extra time. And anyway, we need to keep vigilant on knowing how our community is hurting. But today I can raise my hand to support this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to add, as the council member sitting on the Recovery Task Force, how much I'd like to commend our Manager of Strategic Initiatives, Janet Sperling. Janet is new to Meaford, and she has just really stepped into this huge challenge. And I really appreciate her efforts in chairing these meetings. She keeps us as members of the committee well informed and on track. There are a number of sub-working groups from this committee that are working on initiatives like making sure our businesses know how to secure PPE for their operations. There's just a lot of good discussion at these meetings. And just in relation to the e-commerce request before us today, I think all of us will recognize that the way we shop for things in the future is going to change. It has already changed. The days of going in and looking at things and taking your time and trying things on are not probably going to be the way of the future. So businesses who are going to survive and do well are the ones who can switch to this type of promotion for their operations. So I just think it's really important that we support this. I know that there are businesses who have already stepped up and said they would be very interested in moving forward with this opportunity if council supports it. And I think it's a way for us not only to support our current businesses, but to also show anybody who's considering coming to Meaford to operate a business that we recognize how important it is for them to have this kind of support. So I just think it's good for our economy, it's good for our entrepreneurs, and that we should very strongly consider this request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anything further? Seeing nothing, I will call a question. All in favor of this recommendations, and that is carried. Okay, moving on to COR 2020-26, an award of tender for structure 43 replacement. May I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley. Okay, and Darcy, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're looking at a purchasing report here for structure 43, which is located on the 7th line. It is under budget, which is certainly a good thing, especially in these times. We're bringing it directly to council because of timing related issues, specifically because of COVID. We had planned on trying to get this thing out about a month earlier to tender, but then had issues with trying to tender in a process where people were going to be touching things. Purchasing folks under my staff made a quick switch to try and get everything to online tendering, and it's been working well, but it's put us back a little bit. And ultimately, there's in-water works that are required within this bridge. So we wanted to bring this directly to council, get your direct approval tonight so that we can award the contract, get contracts signed, and let them get started sooner rather than later to make sure that they can get everything accomplished this year. I think it's important to note that even though the project is significantly under budget by about $400,000, that does not mean that as a municipality we have $400,000 in the bank. So this project was being funded about 83% from provincial and federal funds. So ultimately still a good news story, at least it's certainly not over budget, because we would be on the hook for 100% of that. So it came in under budget. What it means for us is that there's about $67,000 that would be left over from what we originally planned that would go back into the bridges and structures reserve fund so that we could use it in the future. If you have any technical questions, Tori will take those. If you have anything related to the purchasing side of things, then I can take those.
Thank you for that, Darcy. Councillor Bartley. And
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this would be to Tori. It would be a technical question. So what are we doing to this bridge? Are we taking it right down to the footings under the water line and replacing everything?
Thank you, through your worship. Yes, this is a complete bridge replacement. The bridge structure that is currently there has reached its end of life, so the entire bridge is being replaced.
So right down to the footings and underwater?
Yes, so everything that is there that is made of concrete or is currently part of the bridge structure will be removed and fully replaced.
Having said that, I think this is a good price. Thank you.
thanks, Tori. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Tori or Darcy or both, whoever wants to take it. Meaford's had some pretty bad luck in terms of getting our bridges completed on time. The neighboring 7th Line Bridge, Sykes Street, and the Big Shop Bridge were all way behind schedule. What have we learned from those bridge constructions, and how can we approach this particular construction company to make sure that they get this bridge done on time? I mean, it's going to be fully detoured and it's going to be a huge inconvenience. And I just don't want to see us going 2 and 3 months over like we have on other projects.
Through your worship, I'll take this to start and say that probably the best thing the council could have done is hired an engineer to lead the infrastructure team instead of an accountant. And hopefully that will ease the pain and make sure this project gets done on time and there's no hiccups.
Rebut.
I guess this is where I get to add some of my knowledge. Obviously, I wasn't involved in the previous bridge projects that we have had. It's not uncommon for construction projects to have additional work added or be impacted by weather, and it's very dependent on the year. But we will be working to ensure that the projects have the necessary time to make sure that residents are being provided with accurate timelines. We have added the addition of 10 weather days right into the initial schedule to try to account for some of the unanticipated delays that we do have. And so we will be working closely to try and improve on previous timelines that have been seen in projects.
Thank you. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, if this is in water work, and if this is a cold water stream, and I expect it is, this will have to be completed by mid-September. This will it not?
Yes, so the in-water work timing for this project is July 16th to September 30th. So that's when the in-water works portion of the project needs to be completed by. But there is additional work, such as the like everything on top of the bridge that will be completed after that point.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Seeing nothing further, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. I think we don't need a break yet. I think we're good. Okay, moving into committee of the whole. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? To Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, the first one is in community service, COM 2020-11, the recreation services cancellation policy. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Greenfield. And over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Recreation cancellations are something of a challenge for pretty much all rec service providers, and the municipality is no exception to that. Up until now, refund requests and cancellations have been treated on a very ad hoc basis, and there hasn't been a standard practice across the municipality for how we should deal with them. So what we're proposing today is a standard policy that deals with municipal facility bookings, recreation programming, summer camps, and swimming lessons. It does not cover the harbour or Memorial Park or Meaford Hall, as all three of those have business plans of their own in development or in place already, and so that those are dealt with separately. This really establishes some fairly simple rules to help make it easier for staff, to make it easier for the public, and to hopefully save us some money at the same time. In effect, residents booking on one of our programs or at one of our facilities will have up to 14 days in which they can cancel their booking and get a full refund. After 14 days, no refunds will be issued at all. But up until 14 days before the event itself, we will offer a transfer, a credit on their accounts, if you like. And so that can be then transferred to another camp or another program or another facility booking at a later date. After 14 days before the event, there'll be no transfers, no credits, and no refunds. And the primary reason for this is that when we get cancellations at the very last minute, and at times over the last few years that has happened on the day of events or the day before events or bookings, we're unable to resell that place. So if we've got a full set of swimming lessons and then somebody drops out at the very last minute, we can't sell that again because nobody knows that it's available. And so we in effect just lose that money. So by having this strict limit at 14 days, that will mean that we have the opportunity to resell the ice time or find another person to take a swimming lesson. And that will mean that hopefully we will have less lost revenue. That's not a direct cost, but it's revenue that we don't get in. This will also save us some money in terms of staff time, because we actually spend quite a lot of time now through the facilities team and through the culture team, and obviously the finance team actually processing payments, dealing with these one-off refund requests. So this will limit those by having some clear rules in place. From the customer's point of view, this will now be immediately available when they book online, when they book in person, and everybody will have a very clear understanding of what the rules are. You will all have experienced this in many, many other places where you get the terms and conditions of your ticket purchase. So really, I don't think this is anything that the public will find difficult to understand at all.
Thank you, Matt. Any comments or questions for Matt? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving this recommendation? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to corporate services, COR 2020-27. It's another award of tender for the surface treatment road rehabilitation. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Vickers and Councillor Bartley. Thank you. Okay. And Darcy, thank you.
Yes, through your worship. Yes, as you mentioned, again, another purchasing report. This one we're not quite so lucky on being under budget, but it's certainly very, very close to budget. Ultimately, we're asking council for authorization to approve the award and also to allow up to $60,000 to be transferred from the Roads Reserve Fund if it's needed. The budget for the project really accommodates the work that needs to be done based on the tender, but it doesn't leave us with any kind of a contingency amount in the event of fluctuating costs for the surface treatment or anything that might be found on site where it would require extra money. So that's why I said to transfer up to $60,000. This would then give the project that 10% contingency of $70,000 to work with. Clearly, if we don't need that much money, then we won't use it. And if we don't use it, then we don't need to transfer up to that amount of money. I would like to take a couple minutes of time to also talk to council about how this tender was put together and that there was some provisional items that were included in the budget, which probably ultimately had COVID not happened, we most likely would have been under budget. But ultimately, there's about $126,000 included in this for a bunch of provisional items that are being requested as part of the tender, specifically for ditching and culvert replacement. And it's because staff just don't have time to do this before the project would start. It was originally in the work plan to do this work. But ultimately, because of the shutdown, because we really limited access to staff for a month or so, this work didn't get done. So we needed to include it in the tender works. The other thing I'd like to mention is that further down in council's discussion tonight, there is a notice of motion with regards to the rubber tire excavator and a request for staff to do some analysis. If the motion passes, certainly Tori and her team and myself and my team will do that analysis, but just to give council a flavor, this machine does complete ditching and the vegetation removal and culverts and so on and so forth. And as you can see from this tender, we included in provisional items, this is 1.5 kilometers of road work between the 23rd side road and side road 23 and side road 33, 1.5 kilometers in total, which means it's about 3,000 kilometers of ditching or 3,000 meters of ditching. That total cost to do that 3,000 meters is $24,000. Works out to $8 a meter, $8,000 a kilometer to do ditching. We have, give or take, 300 plus kilometers of rural roads, which equals 600 kilometers of ditching. And if you take that $8,000, that's $4.8 million. So if we contracted out ditching alone, that piece of kit does, we would be looking at $4.8 million to do the ditching. That doesn't include vegetation. It doesn't include culverts. We are doing culverts in this tender as well. One centerline culvert is $10,000. Typically, it costs us about $4,800 to do the same centerline culvert. We've got 850 centerline culverts to replace over the next 15 years. So we'll do the analysis, but these will be the benchmark costs that we use to do that analysis.
Thank you, Darcy. Any comments? Questions for Darcy? Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I don't know whether this is a question for you, Darcy, or for Tori. My one concern is the Old Mill Road here just above me. It's asphalt right now, and now it's being turned back into tar and chip. And so that's one question. And the other question is, you have in there, I think it was $10,000 for pulverizing the roads. Can you tell us which roads are going to be pulverized and which ones aren't?
Through your worship, I'll take the second part and let Tori get on for the first. So all of the roads are being pulverized. They currently have some form of surface treatment or asphalt or whatever on them. So they all need to be pulverized so that new granular can be added, then the work can be done.
And through your worship, just to add to that, the reason why there's the separate $10,000 is because we are pulverizing some of the road sections prior to the contractor starting their work, because the roads are in a condition where the maintenance costs between now and then would be significant enough that it made sense to pulverize it now and allow that pulverized asphalt to compact to actually create a better road base once that surface treatment goes on. So yes, all the roads are being pulverized, but some sections it was identified to be done prior to the contract. And then Old Mail Road. So based on our recent road counts that were completed in 2019, it was determined that based on the number of cars that are travel Old Mail Road, that road surface would go back to surface treatment. And the reason why it's on this year's road resurfacing program is because during the road scan that was completed last year, it was identified as one of the worst surface treated roads in the municipality. And it's because of all of the alligator cracking that is on it. And so each year with the freeze and thaw in the winter, it just continues to deteriorate. So we have had communication and are continuing to with the residents in that area, but that is why we decided to proceed with the surface treatment along that road section.
Thank you, Tori. Any further comments? Councillor Vickers.
So I guess at one point I thought once a road was at a certain level of maintenance or of a hard top, that it would never go back down below. Is that not the policy then that we have in the municipality? So like a tar and chip road can't go back to gravel, an asphalt road couldn't go down to a lower level of tar and chip. Is that correct, or am I wrong in thinking that?
Oh.
Through your worship, I unfortunately don't have the historical background on that, but we do rely on the number of vehicles that are using the roads each year. We're trying to provide the same level of service to all of our residents. And the tar and chip is still, or the surface treatment is still a hard surface roadway. But we are trying to use the tax dollars of the municipality in the best way possible. And based on the number of vehicles that use each road section each year, we can reevaluate where that money should be spent so that it's being spread out as best as possible.
Through your worship, if I could add as well, the municipality doesn't actually have a formal policy. We actually need to adopt one. We need to develop and adopt one by July of next year as part of the asset management plan and the legislative requirements with regards to that. At this stage of the game is each municipality's responsibility to come up with whatever they believe is reasonable. The ADT on that road is less than 150 cars a day, so certainly doesn't require asphalt. So that's why we went back, suggested to council during the budget process that it go back to surface treatment. But ultimately, council can make whatever decision they want. There's low traffic roads, such as the concession A, that had a similar ADT that was supposed to be surface treated, the council actually put asphalt on. So it's really at this stage of the game without a written policy, it's your directive. Neighboring municipalities like Grey Highlands, their policy is if it's less than 400 cars a day, it's gravel. If it's more than 400 cars a day, it's asphalt. They don't even use surface treatment because they don't like how the product performs. So it's really a decision of each municipality.
So if I can, through your worship, thanks for that explanation. I just thought there was a formal way that it wouldn't go back. So, you know, and I'm fine with that. I understand the car count is you know, lower, and I think that the tar and chip will be fine up there. Although, you know, obviously everybody likes asphalt, but tar and chip is fine. I am happy that it all is being pulverized. I have seen a couple other roads just down the road in the municipality beside us that didn't pulverize the road, and they just put the tar and chip on top of it. And it's, you know, after 1 year, it's already starting to break down. So I am glad that we are at least spending money wisely and not just throwing tar and chip on top of the old roads that will then break up, you know, far sooner than what they should. So I think that's a good way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, Darcy, I thought that we established in some of the discussions in the last year or so that on the long haul, asphalt was not more expensive than tar and chip, but lasts, you know, infinitely longer. Am I right?
Through your worship, there are a couple of road sections where the cost was negligibly different. So the first project that we did an analysis of with different pricing was second concession. There was a section that we did there. The asphalt over a 25-year period was slightly longer or slightly higher, but it was negligible. Concession A, very much the same. I would say the difference between both the concession A and second concession projects versus this one is that we were doing substantive road reconstruction, road base work, substantial drainage work and everything else to try and make the road base good so that the pavement would actually last 25 years. This is really just a pulverize and resurface. If you put 50 mils of asphalt on Old Mill Road without doing a whole bunch of work to it, there's no way you'd get 25 years of life out of it. And then all of a sudden the year over, or the annualized cost between the two really starts to skew heavily.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and with Darcy and Tori. Tori, you probably are included in some history out on Storybook Park Road that you probably have got some information on that. If not, it's an opportunity for you to look that up. And Darcy, I know that you were involved in that area for Storybook Park Road. I go out there from time to time and have a look at that. And when we did that, it was an alternative way of giving a surface to a community out there like that. What is the position right now of the municipality? Even though when we did that, we didn't know how it was going to behave. We didn't know what it was going to be like over a few years. What's the municipality's position on that particular type of surface, Storybook Park Road being the example?
Through your worship, I'd say that from an asset management perspective, it's awesome because it has its place. For these types of roads, this isn't the right place. We've come to realize through doing provisional pricing through recent tenders that the use of the recycled asphalt product with the Reclamite spray is less expensive than asphalt, but not significantly such that the half-life of the product actually outweighs the benefit. So wrap and reclamite is supposed, should last 10 to 12 years. Pavement lasts 25 years under similar conditions. But the wrap and reclamite isn't 50% of the cost. So where we have a process that we really need to have asphalt or something that's, a substantial surface, this is the way to go if we know that we have underground infrastructure or some other project within that 10 to 12 year horizon. And then there's no point in spending extra money to put asphalt down just to rip it up before the end of its life. But to use it, in all cases, it's not really the right product to use. I say that right now. I have my eye on the province of Ontario and what they are going to be doing with regards to resurfacing of Highway 26, probably within the next 3 to 5 years. When they do that project, it'll start again. They did it in 3 phases. They'll resurface it in 3 phases. They're going to do a shave and pave. So they'll mill off the top 50 mills and then they'll put new asphalt down. There will be a significant amount of recycled asphalt at that time. And hopefully we can get in on that and purchase it at a very, very cheap price so that the contractor can literally pick it up off Highway 26 and then go and put it on one of our rural roads right at the same time. And then that's when it becomes, really cost effective to do those projects.
That's good to know, Darcy. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I know Tori, you'll look up the Storybook Park Road history.
Just to add to what Darcy just said, the other thing that we're working through right now is noticing that wrap product has great use on larger or longer sections of road, but we're working through a tender right now on a shorter section of road. And like Darcy said, it has its time and place for it to be used. And we did not receive or are not seeing the pricing we thought we would for a shorter section. So it's good to keep in mind that there are definitely different types of products out there, and it's because they are best utilized in certain scenarios and they're not necessarily cost effective in all scenarios. The wrap also utilizes pulverized asphalt and it rejuvenates it. I don't think it can be used on surface treated roads. At least that's my understanding. And that's why we have used it in the past and look in the future to use it on existing asphalt roads within the municipality.
Thank you, Tori. And Councillor Greenfield.
Your Worship, yes, I was just going to ask Darcy and or Tori if reclamite had been considered for Frogs Hollow, but I think I've got the message on that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything further from council? Seeing none, I will ask the question. All in favor of receiving this recommendation? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to Development Services, DEV 2020-20. It's a land sale request for the GH Lamb and Sun Limited Cemetery lands. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Kentner and Councillor Bartley. Okay, Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Worship. So we've had a request, obviously, as noted from GH Lamb and Sons, to purchase back a portion of the cemetery that they sold to the municipality back in 1994. The portion that they're looking to purchase is physically separated from the remainder of the cemetery by some steep ravines and would be basically, based on staff analysis, would be very difficult to add as part of the cemetery from a financial point of view. The report also highlights our current inventory, realizing that it was a ballpark estimate inventory that staff did undertake in understanding the need for those lands. We note that as we finalize this process, we're going to need to confirm that compliance with the Act. Once you purchase land for a cemetery, it's difficult to put it back. But this, from what we understand, these lands were never brought into the cemetery in accordance with the act. So we do have the flexibility in selling off a portion of it. We note in the report that the funds that the funds to purchase the cemetery, we bought it from the International Order of Fellows, and therefore ensuring that any funds that we do receive from the sale of these lands would go back into the cemetery. So we're still maintaining that original intent of the money that came to the municipality. The amount of the purchase would be based on an appraisal paid for by the proponent. So it would be determined on fair market value, determined by a qualified appraiser going forward. Through the circulation, we did circulate to neighbors because this is a lot addition. Land would be a landlocked parcel. It couldn't be purchased by anybody of the general public. It had to be purchased as a lot addition by adjacent owners. And we did not hear any interest from any adjacent lot owners in that request. So at this point in time, we're in a position to recommend that we declare the best use of land as a lot addition, direct staff to proceed with the nominal process, meaning obtain an appraisal, and then enact the necessary bylaws when the point in time when it's surveyed and we're at a point to agree on a price to bring it forward to council.
Thank you, Rob. Any questions for Rob? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Mr. Armstrong, thank you for this report. And I think this makes sense. I'm wondering about your suggestion of the funds going towards redevelopment of the cemetery. And does that mean then the business plan that we've been talking about for the cemetery? And if so, when do you think that might go forward?
Yeah, through the worship, the business plan or master planning of it. So understanding what our long-term needs is and things like that. And the timing of that, I would have to defer to Darcy and his group on doing that.
Through your worship, yeah, we wouldn't be doing a business plan for the cemetery, but certainly a master plan to try and understand how we would open up the rest of the lands and how we would utilize it, you know, establish an actual, all of the plots and everything else, so we know what our maximum capacity is. And then trying to understand where the best place is for new columbariums and so on and so forth. So that's really the point behind the master plan. I'd love to do it sooner rather than later, but there just isn't financing or hasn't been funding for it versus other priorities within the parks and facilities sphere. I think that ultimately with the sale of this land, some of the money that we would garner from that sale would certainly be able to fund this so that we know what the long-term outlook for the cemetery should be. So if the land sale goes through, this is certainly probably a project that we would want to start in 2021.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Rob, do we have any legal obligations to the International Order of Oddfellows to retain this as purchased for?
None that we're aware of. We'll confirm that through we haven't been able to see any legal obligation. I think there was talk about a cairn being placed in recognition of that donation. That will come out of the master plan. Just any obligations that we will want to carry forward.
Thanks, Rob. Anything further? Okay, and seeing none on that, I will ask the question, all in favor of this recommendation going forward, and that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to DEV 2020-21 is in a consent agreement for Sunny Valley Road. And I believe Councillor Bartley, you declared on that. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table? Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Kempner, thank you. Okay, Rob, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So when the Committee of Adjustment dealt with the Planning Act application and the policies that came forward within the official plans that talk about woodlot preservation, the normal process that they desire is a zoning amendment to protect those areas. That process is very cumbersome. It requires you to another application to go back through full public meetings. But through discussions, it's been agreed that instead of a zoning amendment to protect those areas, we could do an agreement registered on title that would establish those areas for protection going forward. So we have reached an agreement with the Conservation Authority and those implementing the woodlot provisions that we could implement it in this manner. So we're recommending that to do these agreements. This same thing will apply to the next one, but just speaking to the Sunny Valley Road one at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Any questions, comments for Rob? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of this recommendation going forward, and that is carried. Okay, and the DV 2020-22 is another consent agreement for the Sydenham Lakeshore Drive. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. And Councillor Kentner and Councillor Vickers, thank you. Same.
Yep, it's very similar. This is for woodlot protection zoning, or instead of doing a zoning amendment, we're doing an agreement to register on title, yes.
Okay, all right. Anything further to add on that, Council? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of approving this recommendation? That is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to updates from members appointed to County Council or other boards. And we'll start with the County Council. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. County Council met at the call of Warden McQueen on May the 14th via Zoom, as we are now. Bylaws were presented to establish tax ratios for a prescribed property classes for the year 2020, inclusive of the recently agreed to adjustment to the farm tax ratio, which dropped from 0.24 to 0.218. Those were passed. Motion was passed requesting the province conduct a review of farm property tax class rates to determine the appropriateness of these costs and the adequacy of funding being provided to rural municipalities in relation to offsetting these costs with urban dwellers. There's we think, a huge gap between what urban dwellers pay to support agricultural communities through their taxes. So we're hoping that that will be looked at by the province. There was considerable discussion surrounding the need for and the lack of high-speed internet, which is especially noticeable now during the pandemic, in particular with families with school kids at home. And we heard reports today in the news that up to 60% of rural residents do not have adequate high-speed internet. So we're hoping that that issue will be addressed. A letter of intent was authorized by County Council along with a loan guarantee of over $2 million for the SWIFT program. The Grey County is part of phase 3 to move forward with some projects, and we're anxious to see that happen. An RFP process will be undertaken shortly to determine what those projects will be and what areas of the county that are currently underserviced will be addressed. And Your Worship, please feel free to add anything that I've missed.
Well, that's good report. Covers it all. Of course, we meet on Thursday, so we'll have a further update next one. Councillor Vickers.
So I have a question to either you, Your Worship, or to Shirley. You know, the county's looking to, you know, the first part of your report about, you know, changing how the farm tax ratio is administered. So if I could ask, like, what is the county looking for? Is the county looking at increased funding through the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund? Are they looking at going back to the old ways of farmland property tax rebate? Is that the agriculture people pay the full 100%, and then we go to the provincial government to get 75% of that back? what exactly, like, where's the county trying to go with that, and where, what would be the win? What would be a good outcome as far as the county's concerned?
Your worship, I'll start if you like, please chime in. We didn't really agree upon a particular recommendation as such to the province, but we just want to see sort of a review done. I mean, we recognize that OMPF was created initially to cover that gap, and of course it's been cut back every year. It's cut, and that leaves rural municipalities now in a position of not having as much funding to rely on, and we realize that perhaps there are better ways of addressing this than either of the programs that you've described. So I think we're just open at this point to suggestions and ideas as to how this could be better accomplished. Your worship.
Yes, thanks. And just to add to that, the recommendation is to involve the OFA and all of the agricultural communities in exploring this issue, because obviously everybody's affected that way. But basically, the idea is that at one time, all of Ontario, the rural areas and the urban areas most particularly, were supportive of the agricultural community in this manner. And so it gradually has evolved that the full burden of the tax rebate has now fallen on the rural communities, and a large part of the benefit goes to the cities. So that's certainly where the exploration needs to go in terms of looking at fair and equitable tax burdens shared throughout the province.
But
there's
if I could,
nothing further as determined on that.
Right. But if I could, so really the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund is what was replaced from the farm tax rebate. So it's not like the county is doing without any replacement of that 75%. They are getting a certain amount through that fund. Has there been any analysis done to know how much of a hit that the county's taking on the Municipal Partnership Fund, or how much of it, because you said it keeps going down year after year, and I'm just wondering how much of a deficit or a hit have we been taking?
That sounds like a Darcy question.
Through your worship, I wish I could give an exact number. If I had access to our servers right now, I would be able to, but internet doesn't seem to work too well when I try and do both things at once, so I can't. I think from a treasurer's perspective, all the county treasurers meet, we've talked about this. Certainly, we would like to see, if a new program can't be developed that provides equity, then we go back to the old way, like you mentioned, prior to 1998, where the farmer pays 100% and then asks the province for the rebate. Ultimately, the OFA makes a good argument that farmers feed cities, because that's the reality of the situation. But with the way that the taxation system works right now, cities don't pay anything to farmers. It's rural residents that offset that 75%. And clearly the OMPF is not keeping pace. It's been reduced. It's not going up annually with the cost of inflation even. So rural residents are paying for a provincial tax policy. And from our perspective, as a group of treasurers, what we'd like to see is if it's a provincial tax policy, it should be administered by the province, not administered by municipalities.
If I may, though, like the province, really the cities and the urban people are paying, though, a certain amount of that tax through the OMPF, are they not? Like, we can't just say that the large urban centers aren't paying anything into it, and that the rural residents of Ontario are taking up the slack, because that Ontario Municipal, the OMPF fund is funded through the province, is it not, Darcy?
Through your worship, the OMPF is funded through the province, and the municipality receives $1.2 million a year, but only a component of that program, it was originally meant to offset the farm tax. So it's not even like the whole $1.2 million that we get goes against the farm tax. It's only a portion of that, because they use it to, that $1.2 million deals with households, deals with policing, deals with rural economic situations, so on and so forth. So there is significant inequity, even though I understand that the province, through the province, the taxpayers of the province pay that. So effectively, if there are more taxpayers in cities, they pay a larger proportionate share. But the easiest way to make sure that there is true equity is to make sure that 100% of a provincial tax policy is driven by the province and not driven by rural municipalities.
No, it's good. It's good information. It's a complex subject that it's hard to get your head around. So I appreciate the comments that the councillors and yourself have made, Darcy. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has something to share from Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you again, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. One meeting that we will be having on Wednesday afternoon, that's Gray Saba Conservation Authority meeting, and having a meeting with seven politicians and 4 or 5 staff is quite an accomplishment. But when you get into 11 politicians and 4 or 5 staff, that's even more interesting. Just a couple of things coming up on the agenda. Our Haibu Park will be open. Now, unfortunately, the beach area will not be. Might make for a few problems. And according to the report from Mr. Lanthier, our CAO, a couple of our major attractions, English Falls and Eugenia Falls, will still not be open in the near future. And that's rather unfortunate, but as Mr. Chapman has said, and it's necessary in many places. We did have a library board meeting virtually last Wednesday, and caught up with a few pay sheets that needed to be approved. Update from Ms. Fascinato. And Ross, have you got anything you can help me with on the library board meeting? That you go ahead.
Sorry. Pick it up and so forth, the curbside service.
Curbside service.
Sorry, Councillor Kennedy, you were muted. I wasn't fast enough with the button, so you might want to say that again.
Okay, I said that just to add that you can now virtually order your book from the library or your books and get curbside service. So the library is, and also there is some of the webinars that they were, or at least some of the seminars they were planning are turning into webinars. And I think it's around June the 9th that there's going to be some good training for people who are employment displaced through COVID. There's some great programs that you might want to, sit in on those seminars. They're free, just pre-register, and it'll be, I think, very interesting.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. And let's move, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to mention that the Northeast Grey Health Centre Board held its AGM on Tuesday, May the 9th. The good news is that both Meaford and Thornbury clinics now have 3 doctors each, and they're paying rent. So the centers are in a bit better financial position these days. The physio and laser centers are all closed, of course. Doctor recruitment efforts are still underway, although those are hampered by the current crises. A new business plan for the clinics is going to be investigated, and this is going to look at hopefully a system that may be developed that will be more attractive to young physicians in relation to how payments are made, and how that process works for the doctors. So I'll keep you posted on that, and thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on now to the building report. Understandably a little disappointing, Councillor Greenfield, but did you have a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, well, when you cut down or cut off construction completely for almost 6 weeks, especially at the beginning of the year, you're going to take a hit financially as far as building permits are concerned. However, everything's back in gear now. All of the companies are back at the building. I've talked to a few builders. They're very busy. As a matter of fact, I talked to one who said they couldn't even discuss any further building until late this fall because they are completely booked. So I can guarantee you that these numbers by the end of the year are going to look quite satisfactory. Which are going to turn around big time. Thank you.
Light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you for that. Could I have a motion to move out of committee of the whole, please? Councillor Greenfield and seconded by Deputy Mayor. Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay. Are there any notices of motion coming forward? Councillor Kentner?
Yes, I would like to serve notice of motion to call for share the road signage as part of the reconstruction of Frogs Hollow Side Road, and also for other municipal roads that are popular with cyclists.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Greenfield?
Yeah. I have 2 notices of motion that I wish to bring forward. Mr. Smith has copies of
You're currently muted, Councillor Greenfield. There we go. Thank you.
Sorry, are we okay now?
We are.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. My fingers did the walking there, unfortunately. The first motion has to deal with the, interestingly enough, with the councillors' budget and the budget pertaining to conferences and seminars for this year. We do have money in the 2020 budget for a number of councillors conferences and seminars, but of course, due to the COVID-19 virus, this just isn't going to happen. So I'm suggesting that $2,500 be taken from this budget and donated to our local food bank. A lot of our residents have suffered financially from the virus, and one of the items they're having problems with is acquiring food. This is ongoing. I'm afraid the need for good food will go on well into the rest of the year. And so I'm asking that from a budget that has already been approved and will not be maxed out, we would donate $2,500 to the local food bank. And we would, as a priority, as often as possible, ask that the foodstuffs that are purchased for the food bank be bought from those who are registered now with the local farmers market. Hopefully that can help out their causes a little bit too. So that's one I'll be bringing forward. The other one we have talked about earlier in the session, and that's the Bayfield Street situation. And I am bringing forward a notice of motion to have cameras, basically security cameras installed in strategic locations along Bayfield Street. Bayfield is it's not just a street.
Sorry, this is just a notice. This is
Yes,
just a notice. You can explain it later. Okay. farm tax number. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, and we'll see those coming back. I've just had a note that Darcy has some numbers that have been asked for in terms of the farm tax numbers, and would like to pass them along to council. So Darcy, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for letting me in. I know that this is something that council probably wants to know. So for 2020, the total amount that we will get from farmlands is $500,190. That's based on a ratio of 0.218. If we went back to the way it was, where we collect 100% of the taxes, so a ratio of 1, we would actually get $2,047,343. So that's a difference of $1,547,153. The OMPF that we receive for 2020 has 3 different components to it. A portion of it is based on assessment of household. A portion of it is based on the fact that we are a northern community. And the third part is based on the fact that, that we fit within the rural communities. And that's specific to the fact that we have a certain percentage of our land that is farm. So that rural communities grant, which is effectively the offset to the farm tax stuff, is $754,100. So the province's tax policy on farmland is costing the municipality of Meaford and its taxpayers, and this is the local component only. You would add on the county impact to this as well. But the local component for this is $793,053. So 6,700 taxpayers in Meaford are paying almost $800,000 for a provincial policy.
Sobering. Thank you very much, Darcy. Appreciate that. Okay, let's move on now to motions for decision. First one is from Councillor Bell of Municipal Roadside Vegetation Management. I'm assuming, Councillor Bell, that you will move that. Could I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Kentner. Did you wish to speak to it, Tony, or?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So earlier this evening, when we had a guest speaker, the Donovans, who were addressing the issue of the vegetation head on the excavator. And I think for those who may not have a copy of the agenda, I would like to just read it. Council of the Municipality of Meaford approved the Service Delivery Review -07 in July of 2016, requiring that there was a business case be presented to council for all specialized fleet equipment. Whereas council received a business case for the purchase of a rubber tire excavator in February of 2018 and approved the award of the tender. Whereas the rubber tire excavator is currently used for ditching, vegetation management, culvert replacements, and winter control. And whereas council has received requests from residents to reconsider the use of the equipment for roadside vegetation management. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford direct staff to bring forward a report detailing the current use of the rubber tire excavator and the municipality's vegetation management program, and that the report also include a financial analysis of the cost of the service that the rubber tire excavator is used for, the sale of the rubber tire excavator, and the cost of costing out comparable services. Madam Mayor and fellow councillors, it is the hydraulic cutter head, the vegetation removing portion, that is the concern of the ratepayers. And I believe that most of us on council know every time where this machine goes, that there are things that I hope that the report brings forward for our consideration, that back before we bought the rubber-tired excavator, we were using an older grade all machine for doing the ditches. It is the cutter head that people are witnessing, and it is the cutter head on the excavator and how we attack vegetation. I realize, of course, that we've had reports before council that talk about trying to get around all our rural areas in a 10-year period. And I realize that we're going to have a report from staff to tell us how we can do this and do that husbandry of our rural community ditches, knowing that we've got, as Darcy has said earlier, probably 800, maybe more, closer to 1,000 kilometers of ditching and vegetation work. So I do look forward to a report on this, and I hope that my fellow councillors can move in a way that we get to ask staff to put together this report. So thank you for that.
Any further comments from council? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I want to express my appreciation to Councillor Bell for bringing this forward, and also to Mr. and Mrs. Donovan for their deputation today. And thinking back to the business case for the purchase of this rubber tire excavator, and the fact that at the time, and it may have just been me, but I don't believe council was really presented with a full understanding of the devastation that this particular brushing head was going to cause. We weren't expecting to see the trees as brutally damaged as they were. In particular, and I'll never forget the day that I was called and Councillor Brow was kind enough to come with me, and we went out to see the activity that this brushing head was undertaking, and residents were so upset. Residents were in tears. It was awful. And seeing the trees just ripped apart as they were is a situation that our residents are not happy with, and some of us on council are not happy with either. So I very much look forward to this motion being passed and to receiving that report from staff as to how this clearing of the roadways can be better managed. Thank you.
And I have Councillor Bartley. Did you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we are not interested in any sort of report on the rubber tire excavator, I'm sure, because I know we need that. This piece of kit that takes the vegetation down, I think it has a place in the municipality for the small vegetation, for the small shrubs and whatnot. We now have on staff Tori, and she has somebody under that is an arborist. I don't believe this piece of kit should be used on mature trees to take the big limbs off. That should be done by hand, and I think that is going to be looked at. We do need some sort of report on how we can stop it. If we sent this piece of machine downtown Meaford to some of the mature trees down there, there would be an uprising. This should stop on the mature trees, and I'm looking forward to the report. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Steve on your comments, and I do feel we all look at it as the machine is the problem, and I really question it's the operators that are trying to maybe do more than what they should be trying to do, and you know, once you get above you know, a 3 or 4 inch diameter, you know, why are they still trying to take it down with this machine? So I agree with what everything's been said, and look forward to the report. But I really do think it's an operator issue, not a machine issue. So thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Kentner, and then Tori, I'd like you to respond, if you will, please. Councillor Kentner first.
I'd just like to go on record that I think that we do have a different party managing operations at this time, and I have a lot of confidence in Tori that things are going to improve. I guess what I want to say is it's not just about, you know, the need for roads, but we have some very, very, you know, natural heritage spots in our community that are treasures, and to see them desecrated with no sort of sense of the damage being done is just mind-boggling to me. And I'm looking forward, that's why I'm voting for this motion. And I'm okay with keeping the machine to do the work that needs to be done, but let's get rid of the cutter or whatever it is that mangles trees and not just, you know, trims them, but basically destroys them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Tori.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hope I can provide a little bit of insight right now, but yes, we can definitely provide more information through our report. So since I've been on board, there have definitely been changes with our vegetation management program, including that rural tree removal along some of our roads. We're lucky to have a new transportation manager who's actually a certified arborist, and she's been able to provide a lot of input into the program and assist with our staff who are involved with that forestry work. Starting, I guess, in 2020, we have been providing notices to all residents who are impacted by this work. And this provides them a chance to reach out to the municipality prior to any work being completed. And so far, we have gotten some residents reaching out, but it's mostly just questions. There hasn't necessarily been any negative feedback. We have completed 1 kilometer of brush removal on side road 33, as well as on side road 23. And we're just wrapping up just under 2 kilometers of work on St. Vincent Sydenham town line. So these are the areas where we're doing that surface treatment this year. So this work's being completed prior to it happening. And so the program includes that cutting head being used on trees that are 15 centimeters or smaller in diameter. So those smaller trees as indicated by some counselors. And then we're going in with that bucket truck and chainsaws to remove any of the larger trees that need to be removed as part of the work. I know some areas we don't need as much of that work done, but on the town line, that's what we're wrapping up right now, as well as some of that removal. So the next step is we go in and clean it up. If the work was completed in the winter, we wait until the snow has melted and then go back in and clean up. And then once all the cleanup is done, that allows us to go back and do that necessary ditching. And that's part of the reason why that tree removal needs to happen, so that we can do the drainage work to allow our roads to be properly drained. I know there was some mention about how Hydro completes this work. This year, we've actually been completing work in conjunction with Hydro, so that we're not doubling up on the equipment that's needed for the work on different road sections. And in some cases, Hydro is utilizing the same piece of equipment that we are. It depends on what work they're doing, but it just like for us, it's used when it makes sense, and they use other pieces of equipment when needed. So there really has been significant changes since 2018, when I know that unfortunately some work was done near the Donovan's property, and they saw negative impacts. But I just want you and residents to know that it is an evolving program, and it has come a long way. And the piece of equipment really allows us to get a lot of work done very quickly. And if we use it correctly, then we can do we have different types of work that need to be done with different pieces of equipment. But we've seen a lot of positive feedback from residents this year, and they're happy to see that their roadways are being cleaned up and that drainage work can go back the way it should be, so that the road surface can function to the best of its ability. So hopefully that provides a little bit more information, but we can definitely provide more in a report.
Thank you, Tori. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Director Tory. I'm really glad to hear that you are jumping in on this, on the use of this this piece of equipment. I truly believe there is a place for it in our municipality. It can have a satisfactory use. I'm not sure it needs to be whacking tree limbs off 30 to 35 feet in the air, but it sounds like you're looking into this kind of thing. I just want to give us an example. Hydro One's been mentioned a couple of times, and the cost of 2 men with a bucket truck from Hydro One, plus 2 men with a chipper and a truck to load the chippers on, runs $570 an hour. Now that's Hydro One money. That's not municipal money, but that's just an example of the costs that can be incurred when this type of work is done. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield. Is there anything further from council? Councillor Bell.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Tory, for your comments about the Sydenham St. Vincent town line. Actually, that is a prime example of what has happened. I got permission from the landowner, and that machine had ripped off chunks of wood that I'm 6'2", and I consider my pacing to be a little bit over a yard or about a meter in stride. And I was 60 strides away from the fence line. And I personally picked up 2 pieces of wood that were worthy enough to be put in my wood burning stove, and I did so. So how it throws the wood is horrendous. And out there on the Sydenham St. Vincent town line, it is true that the bucket truck has now been deployed to cut the limbs after the destruction from the cutter head. So if we're putting the cutter head down low, that's fine. And if we're using chainsaws in the bucket truck up higher, we don't need to do chainsawing after that. It's only my thoughts on that, Tory, but I do really look forward to hearing this report on how we're going to manage this in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything further from council? And seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor of receiving this motion? And that is carried. Okay, the second motion we have is sponsored by Deputy Mayor Keaveney and electronic committee meetings. I'm assuming that you will move that, Deputy Mayor.
I would be delighted to, Your Worship.
And can I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Kentner. Okay. Over to you then, Deputy Mayor. Did you wish to speak to it first?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do, and I won't read the motion. I think it's self-explanatory, but I'll just add that I know that the committees of council that we have are anxious to get back to work. People have been feeling out of the loop, and any volunteers who have been chosen to sit on these committees, I think are feeling very much like they would like to get back in operation and provide important input into the operations of the municipality. Other communities have gone forward and proceeded with electronic meetings for their committees, and I believe it's the right time for me to do this as well.
Okay, thank you. Anything further, Councillor Kentner?
I would just like to add as well, I know the Heritage Committee is a group that, you know, feels that they could be doing some good work at this point. My heavens, you know, ladies' aid groups are doing this, you know what I mean? And church groups, you know, it's not rocket science, and we need to get on with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I call the vote on this, I would just like to ask our clerk, Matt, if what the impact might be, given the fact that we are still in emergency status for the next while, we don't know how long. But what kind of an impact would reinstituting these committees and boards, particularly the committees that may take up some staff time and effort in particularly with the logistics of organizing virtual meetings? Matt, do you have any thoughts on that at this stage?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll obviously have more thoughts where should this motion pass and we come forward with a report, but there are a couple of things that will definitely impact some of the operations that we have right now. One is, of course, that staff will have to actually get people going on these systems. We have a very wide variety of committee members, and as council members, and if some councillors I'm still doing, we sort of have to set you up and get started for that. The other thing is that and council and staff have had a significant conversation over the last few months about making our committees more substantial to give these very valuable community members something to get their teeth into. And we certainly started to talk internally about what those agendas might look like and how reports could go to the committees. Obviously, now if we're going to have committee meetings, that will mean that the staff who are involved in those will need to write those reports, get those documentations together. And for some of those staff, that will take them away from some of the day-to-day work that they're doing right now to get us back to full functioning.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from council? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of this motion going forward, and that is carried. Thank you. And the third one is from Councillor Bartley, a quote for paved shoulders on the Forest Side Road. Councillor Bartley, I'm assuming that you will move that motion.
Yes, I do move it.
And could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Greenfield. Thank you. Did you wish to speak to it, Councillor Bartley?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. In the past, we were looking at reconstructing this section of the road, widening the ditches, widening the road. That's not what I'm asking for here. I'm asking for a quote simply to pave the shoulders that are there. I know there is going to have to be some reconstruction of the shoulders because they're at a different percentage grade than the rest of the road, but it's not going to cost us anything for a quote. We'll know where we're standing at. This quote has come in so far below budget, and if it's not too much more to add this little bit of pavement to the shoulders, I would like to have a look at that going forward because of the hill and the circumstances with that. I'd also like to know is their request has come in that we could have a 6 meter wide driving space. Maybe Tori could answer that. Is that legal in the municipality, going to a 6 meter wide, which would give us almost enough room now?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. We currently require through our standard 3.25 meter driving surface, and that makes up the 6.5 meters that we have in the contract. I think that we are allowed to go as low as a 2.7. It's not a municipal standard, it's a provincial standard on a road width. So yes, a 3 meter wide would be acceptable, but it would not meet the municipal rural standard road. It would differ from our engineering standards.
Okay, so but putting the white lines on it, would that change anything? Anyways, I would like to have a quote on doing this as written and having it done. And it's not going to cost us anything for a quote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Any other questions? Councillor Vickers?
So I guess my one concern is that, if we get this quote, is this going to delay, how much is this going to delay the construction of the road? Like, when is it due to be torn up? Or to have construction start?
Tori?
Through your worship. Yeah. So construction has not yet proceeded. We are in discussions with the contractor on what their schedule will look like. But we've actually already started asking for a quote on this, so there should not be a delay in construction seen. And we'll work with the contractor to see if they're able to get this work done within the contract specified time. There's a window that they can schedule construction, so there should be more than enough time for them to complete the work within that window with the additional work added.
I guess through your worship, I guess I'm just afraid that, I know there's a certain amount of the population that wants the paved shoulders for the bikes, but there's also a large percentage of the population that just want the road fixed. We've put it off a year now, trying to navigate our way through this, and I just hate to see that this project doesn't get done in 2020 and that actually gets pushed out to 2021. So I think we do have to keep in mind that also. So thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Paul. I have no intentions of delaying this project one day. I want this all done, and I've been told by Tory that it could happen the same day that they're planning on doing it. This is just a small quote to add to the work they're doing. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further from council? And I will call the question. All those in favor of getting this quote? And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the adoption of the minutes, the council meeting of May the 11th, 2020. Have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley, Deputy Mayor. Any comments, questions on that? And seeing none, all in favor? Lost my meeting. Communications, yes, but I don't have the other paper. And I'm
So just communications and confirming bylaw.
that's it. Okay. It appears I'm missing some of my agenda. So we're just on to communications now. Is there anything in communications that needs to be pulled? Seeing none. That brings us down to the confirming bylaw. And I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the. Thank you, Councillor Bartley and Councillor Bell. And all in favor of that bylaw, and that is carried. And that brings us to adjournment. And I will thank everyone for their participation today. And there's still some sunshine left. We can all get out there and enjoy the day. Thank you so much. And we will see you next on June the 1st.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.